I need you to tell me something. What do these three things have in common? 1, cosmically unhinged villains that send chills up and down your spine. 2, super hot, spicy scenes that make steam look cool. And 3, an unforgettable backdrop of Native American culture and battles. Today, we find out. Hello, and welcome back to the Book Love Podcast, where we go into and beyond the pages in front of us. I'm your host, Matt from Ohio, and today we're diving into book 2 of the Blade of Shadow series, Darkness of Time by Sara Samuels. If you're not familiar, the Blade of Shadow series is an epic dark romantasy series where individuals who are born in complete darkness during a solar eclipse have a gift to manipulate time. They're called Timeborns. But they are also simultaneously born with a corresponding dark entity that hunts them across time and seeks to raise hell. I lovingly refer to these as Shadowborns. Timeborns are tasked with destroying the Shadowborns and restoring peace to the universe, right? Originally published in September of 2023, Darkness of Time is a fantasy novel that borders on dark fantasy, and it has romance in it, hence the dark romantasy. The ebook version I read comes in around 460 pages, and I leisurely read it in 4 days. So, what's it about? This second installment picks up right where book 1 ends, right? Olivia wakes up in a strange forest after time traveling from like 200 AD ancient Rome to somewhere in North America circa 1812. She meets a girl she feels very strongly connected to named Emily, and together the two escape multiple perils until they're finally reunited with Roman and Marcellius, who also time traveled from ancient Rome. The 4 of them are taken in by a tribe of Sioux Native Americans while being hunted by the malevolently unhinged shadowborn demon overlord dude named Balthazar, who seems to have the goal of destroying all Timeborns. The story follows Olivia as she navigates this new time period, uncovers secrets from her past, and fights to save her future with Roman from the escalating threats. And that is without giving away any spoilers. It's good, guys. Like, really good. Like I said, it nudges closer to dark fantasy, but I wouldn't classify it as dark fantasy quite yet. It deals with time travel, destiny, good versus evil, uncovered pasts, uncovered secrets, and of course, spicy romance. So let's get into the review, rating, and recommendation things. All right, first and foremost, this novel hooks you. Personally, I was hooked on sentence 1, which is an extremely rare thing. And then the book hooks you over and over again throughout it. Just like any story, there's going to be like peaks and valleys and lulls or whatever, where you feel like you're beginning to disengage, but then the book reels you back in. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this one. But like, how does this compare to the rest of the series, right? Darkness of Time is definitely a step up from book 1, Timeborn. But it's also no match for the prequel novel, Rise of the Shadow Lords. If you want to see reviews for those 2 books, I'll link them somewhere here in the show note. Just, you know where to find the things. All that being said, I rated book 1, Timeborn. I rated this novel right between book 1, Timeborn, and the prequel novel, Rise of the Shadow Lords, and I gave it like a 4.25. But star ratings really don't matter. So I want to talk about why I'm rating it that way and how I feel about it. Maybe I want to talk about some things that I wish were done differently, some things that made me go, and some things that I loved. And to do that, I can't guarantee a lack of spoilers, Listen, I won't spoil the plot, but I'll probably talk about some characters and their relationships and things that you learn along the way. So you've been warned. From here on out, I cannot guarantee to remain spoiler free, even though I'll try. So let's get the negatives out of the way first, shall we? I want to talk about some things that I wish were slightly different or tweaked. And honestly, there's nothing overly obvious, but I did find myself considering some small, objectively unimportant nits that I can pick, right? First, I'm still not 100% positive how the time traveling magic works. Okay. I mean, listen, cut yourself with a dagger, chant some magic words under a full moon, and you shift in time to wherever that timeborn is needed most. I get that. I get it. It's logical. I get it. But Olivia and Roman don't seem to be able to control it. But the Shadowborn demon people seem to be able to control it. And Olivia's mom and Moon Lee seemingly time travel to wherever the hell they want, when they want. So does it just so happen that Olivia's mom, Moon Lee, and the Shadowborns, like where they're needed happens to be where they want to go? Or have they unlocked some next level control of the magic system? I don't know. And listen, I get it. There are loads more books coming for all of this to become clear. Well, fingers crossed, right? Piggybacking off that minor worry, the second thing I noticed is that some things kind of seem to occur too easily. Listen, like I said, timeborns are transported to where they are needed most. So it makes sense that like stuff and things and information would just be right there because the timeborn is needed for those reasons, right? But I wish Olivia and Roman had to work harder for some things. Here, a couple of examples of things that came too easy, right? Meeting Emily and just learning how Emily is connected to Olivia, or gaining all of the required cosmic information through Chief Greyfeather because he just knows Timeborn history and lore and how the daggers work. And meeting John James like so fortuitously in the woods. Listen, though, the way it's written is very fluid. I never feel like these events are just inserted. They always make sense. But on some level, it kind of risks the story becoming completely based on fate when the characters matter less. Especially when the Shadowborns, Olivia's mom, and Moon Lee all seem to have agency and a master plan. And again, I know that there are loads of books where explanation and rationale are going to be discovered. I get that. Fingers crossed, right? My very last item that made me pause and wish it was ever so slightly different is the concept of like timing, maybe pacing. Darkness of Time is definitely a step up from Timeborn, but it still has plenty of instances where there's like a random paragraph that's like, and then a couple of weeks passed, or a few months later. You know, I think it's fine. But I think I'd prefer there to be some time of like passage montage. So you get a sense of what's happening in between, both physically and emotionally. Otherwise, it just sort of feels like we're skipping ahead to the next dramatic scene. Or if we do get details of what's happening across the passage of time, it's not always consistent. An example of this is like a journey to somewhere might take a few days, but then that same journey in reverse seems to take a few weeks. And it's like, why? But, you know, I don't think this ruins the novel. I don't think it's a concern for the series, especially since I've read the prequel to the series and there was none pacing issues there. my best guess is that this is something that the author has sort of just gotten better at over time. And this, and like I said, in no way, shape, or form does this derail the story. I've read other books where this particular concern ruins the story, makes me angry to read it, right? This is not one of those. But now I want to talk about some things that they're not good, they're not bad. They just made me go, I have questions for the author. And I think in particular, there are two. So let's start out with the first one, which is the concept of historic accuracy. All right. Here's my thought that I want to ask Sara Samuels. As an author, when do you purposefully decide to not be historically accurate in favor of a scene working better or in favor of better information transmission to your readers? Two examples, okay? The first easy one to spot is that when Olivia time travels back to 1812, she obviously has no idea what time period it is, right? And she asks Emily, a character native to that time period, what war is going on, and Emily responds that it's the War of 1812. 100% it was not referred to the War of 1812 in 1812. I think that came like 15 years later in the newspapers. But if Emily would have told Olivia that it's Mr. Madison's war, or, it's the Second Revolution, would modern day 21st century readers like easily understand what's going on and what time period it is? Personally, I highly doubt it. Okay, a second example is during a battle between Native American tribes. I think it's the Sioux and the Kiowa. People, notably, I think it's Roman, seem to fire a rifle continuously with no reloading, which is exactly how firing a rifle today would work. But back then, like, first thing, rifles existed, but rifles weren't super common. They were kind of like the step up from the common musket, right? Rifles were more expensive. They took a little bit more time and know-how to manufacture, and therefore they're more expensive to sell. So muskets were still the typical gun of choice, right? But would many 21st century readers be super familiar with what a musket is? Maybe, maybe not. More to the point, right? At that time, there were some repeating firearms, but they were pretty experimental, and they weren't widely sold. They would have been kind of rare. It's highly doubtful that they would have been traded or sold to the Native Americans. Back then, a man could reload and fire a musket up to 3 times in a minute, which is very impressive. But our main characters, Roman and Marsilius, had just lived in ancient Rome for over a decade and would have been like super out of practice with that. So if they had to reload the muskets, it's doubtful they could have unalived enough enemies to like save the day, right? It would have that would have spoiled the action scene. You wouldn't have had the same result. Especially now if you're like writing fluff and filler to describe how to reload a muzzle loading musket or rifle, which is definitely not in keeping with the flow of these stories. Anyways, I'm getting long-winded. Point. I love history, and part of the allure of a time travel story is that I get immersed in the various time periods. But if it's not historically accurate, it sort of takes me out of that time period in question. But that's a me thing, and I get that. So while I wish things were more historically accurate for my own cognitive pleasure, I can completely understand why an author isn't always historically accurate. So, like, as an author, when do you decide to forego being 100% historically accurate in favor of making the scene read really well and smoothly, or perhaps making it easier for readers to understand what's going on? The second thing that made me go, is the big bad himself, Balthazar. One thing, the way that Sara Samuels kind of boasts and markets the series as a whole is the concept of its unhinged villains, and I will say she delivers as far as evil dudes go. I like Balthazar. He is A1, right? In fact, he reminds me of a more emotionally unhinged version of Baalzaman from The Wheel of Time. My concern is not with Balthazar in and of himself. Rather, my ever so slight worry is that I can't understand him. I can't understand his motives. And then that makes me question the entirety of the story, right? So there are times when Balthazar seems to have a plan. He wants to achieve certain ends. And he's using Olivia and other Shadowborns to achieve those goals and hurting and aliving anyone or anything that like gets in his way, right? He lies, he cheats, he tells the truth, he manipulates, he tortures, he flatters. He does anything to get what he wants. And in that way, he embodies the concept of a neutral evil being perfectly well. A neutral evil being is someone who is completely self-interested and will do whatever they can get away with to advance their goals with no particular loyalty to law or chaos. But then there are other times when Balthazar doesn't seem to have a plan at all, or rather, he does things that are just completely counterproductive to the plan I thought he has, right? There, here's one example. This happens throughout the book, but here's one example, right? He asks Olivia to go on a quest for him, and when she goes on that quest, he shows up unceremoniously and derails and stops the quest, and then hurts Olivia as punishment for not completing the quest quick enough. So, in that way, he embodies the concept of a chaotic evil being, which is someone who is driven by arbitrary violence or greed or whatever and has no respect for rules or the lives of others. Okay. The combination of these tropes in one dude is making him undoubtedly unhinged, just as advertised. But because I don't quite understand Balthazar yet, I don't know how to trust or distrust anything he says or does, right? I can't tell if he's an unreliable narrator. I can't fully judge the main character's choices in relation to him. And I can't predict whether his actions are deliberate or purely disruptive. Um, and because we're talking about an epic fantasy here, there's lots of foreshadowing. There's going to be a lot of domino effects, right? But I don't I don't know if I'm going to be able to trust what happens in the future simply because I'm starting to not trust things as fact now, right? I'm not asking for predictability, and I fully expect that I'll understand him better in future installments. But what I feel like I'm missing right now is a sense of character continuity, not because the story demands it, but because I think it would make my personal reading experience um, and cohesiveness feel a little bit better. As it is, though, Balthazar stands alone as an evil character because of the multiple trope combination, right? There's not there's not many that are both neutral and chaotic evil at the same time, and frankly, that's pretty special, I think. On to some things I think this book does really well. Number one, I'm going to call this, let's talk about spice and not everything nice, right? Okay. Sara Samuels writes steaminess and spicy scenes really well. Like, I think I said this in the intro. Steam feels cool. You know what I mean? And if you get that as a Hercules reference, good for you. Um, listen, she makes the steamy scenes really real feeling. but she still maintains them as a fantasy. They're not so unrealistic or too realistic. They're like the actual like fantasy you have in your dreams at night. You know what I mean? Um, a lot of fantasy steamy scenes drift into being like unrealistic caricatures, but Sara Samuels doesn't do that. Like these are the kind of steamy scenes that make you put your book down after you read them and do a few laps around the house to cool down, you know? Um, but at the same time, she writes the other side of the coin really well, violence. Like you feel the violence. That could be torture, could be a battle, could be just a one-off cruel moment, but it's always visceral. It's always graphic, but somehow avoids being traumatic. Like to you as the reader, you're not traumatized by what you just read. Um, listen, I had to put the book down and scroll some Instagram videos of dogs or stand-up comedy for a while after some of these scenes. But like, 15 minutes later, you're like, all right, let's dive back in. Like they're really well written. Number two of the things I love is how she uses tropes and archetypes. Um, and I think this is important because today, no book is going to be 100% unique. Just like no song, no musical song that's written will ever be 100% unique. Too much has been written. Our world has been too saturated with literature, right? To the point where things are going to influence you at a subconscious level, whether you're not even aware of it. I personally think that many authors try too hard to create something new to the point where you're like, the hell is that? But I think this author uses plenty of typical things and then makes them feel new, her own, exciting, right? And for the record, I have no idea if she's actually doing that. Not a clue, just my thoughts and opinions. But here are some examples of that. Okay, so like the book feels like most time travel books, especially at the beginning here. You just time traveled back to a strange forest in a time you don't know. Like that's every time travel book. And quite frankly, that feels like the first time that there is time travel in Outlander, right? Um, but then what Olivia does feels new, fresh, unique, you know? Um, usually in time travel books, the main character doesn't actually even know that they time traveled, but Olivia does, and she immediately starts trying to predict where she is in the world. Maybe not what time period it is, but where she is, and that felt really interesting. Okay. Number two, it uses like common Native American characters and motifs. Um, I was immediately reminded of some kind of weird hodgepodge mashup of the Mud People from Sword of Truth and the Aiel from the Wheel of Time. But these Native American people didn't feel like either of them. Um, it was like a lot of historically accurate Native American things that were then exacerbated or hyperbolized, that were written hyperbolically to take it to another level for effect, for causation. And it never felt weird. It always felt unique, right? Um, the big bad in this book is Balthazar, like I touched on before, he is the typical cosmic overlord hellbent on universal domination. He reminds me of like Baal-Zaman from the Wheel of Time. And especially because when Balthazar captures and tortures Olivia and Roman at some point in the book, I'm heavily reminded of the concept of a dream shard from the Wheel of Time. This space that like exists but doesn't exist, and it's unique to the owner of the space, right? But Balthazar is also, he's simultaneously more rational and logical and also more insane than most big bads I've ever read. Um, he's multiple character tropes in one, right? He's new, he's fresh, he's exciting. He's different while still being the same. And that concept of feeling familiar but being new and different is, I think, it's perfect, right? The familiar makes you interested, but the unique keeps you wanting to move forward and learn. And lastly, there's a very clear enemies to friends trope going on. Um, but it feels natural and it feels organic. It never feels forced. And usually with the enemies to friends trope, the two enemies kind of work it out. But in this one, they don't work it out. Somebody else comes in and changes one of them for the better. And so it's a common trope, but the way it's implemented is fresh, it's different, it's cool. And lastly, things I loved about this book. Did I mention how well written the spicy scenes are? Check those out. So, should you read it? Yes. Book One Timeborn provided the promise of setting up an amazing series, and Darkness of Time fully delivers on that promise, right? Now that the characters and history and magic system are a bit more established, it's easier to get invested. But more than that, the writing is also better. It's tighter. It's a little bit more mature. The world feels more real. Listen, I studied ancient Rome in college, so it's not that I can't picture it or I don't understand it. That's not the thing. This world feels more real. The danger feels more present. The stakes feel higher. It's not just, will this boy like me and did he lie to me, right? And also, this book does not end on a cliffhanger. But like, I still need to know what happens next. My recommendation is this: read this book and read this series. Let's hear. So if you like dark fantasy, like if you really like the dark stuff, start with the prequel, Rise of the Shadow Lords, and then go into book one, Timeborn, and then follow the rest of the series. But if you like fantasy, if you like romance, right, just go ahead and start with book one, Timeborn, and then immediately dive into this book, Darkness of Time. And so that's my recommendation. That's my review of Darkness of Time by Sara Samuels. And I think I'll go ahead and put a bookmark in it for now. As always, let me know what you think. What went well for you? What didn't you like? What did you have questions on? I'd love to know. I'd love to know. I'm invested in the series and I want to know what you think. So if you'd like to contact me, if you'd like to work together, whatever, my contact information is in the description down below. So until next time, cheers.